All right, good morning, everyone. So like we mentioned earlier, this is the second iteration of our Zoom training, Zoom Breakout Rooms, the January 2021 version. If you have never come to a breakout room session before, this is a great place to start. If you have come to a breakout room session before, this is also still a good place to be because especially if you haven't really either gone to a training or played around with this since like last summer or the beginning of last fall, there's been a lot of changes to breakout rooms in Zoom, and there are changes for the good, which is what's nice. Zoom, when Zoom created breakout rooms, it wasn't for education, right? It was really for meetings to do kind of one-offs to be able to have that. But with everything what happened with the pandemic, obviously breakout rooms became kind of like the pivotal piece of being able to deliver a remote session. And so Zoom was awesome at hearing kind of our request and made a lot of changes to make things a little bit easier on the instructor side of the house, as well as just cut down on the kind of busy work that it might take logistics wise. And so I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. As always, you know where to get us if you need to get a hold of us. We encourage you to use we do request that you, instead of emailing one of us directly, either Corelli or I, send that email to the help desk. All of them come to us, don't worry. It just lets us get to you a little bit quicker. So what we'll cover today, it probably won't run the whole hour, which is good because then we'll do kind of like a little bit of a demo of, if you've never experienced breakout rooms, what that's like. The one thing that's unfortunate is this is really a PowerPoint heavy kind of screenshot only type of training, if you want to call it that. The way Zoom is, since we're all on Zoom, we can't really demo the behind the scenes thing because Zoom hides all of that for the participants, right? And so I'm sorry, we don't like doing sessions like this, but it kind of is the best way though to get you guys the information. So that's why we'll do the demo at the end, like just so you can see what it's like. So why breakout rooms, right? If you were not familiar with using this concept in the past before, as a reminder, it's a great way to help facilitate small group discussions online and virtually. It does also allow something that I think people forget about, in the beginning of our regular class, when we're in non-COVID times and somebody's just walking onto campus, walking into your classroom, you have that interaction at the beginning of class, or maybe at the end of the class when students want to ask you that private question. Breakout rooms is also a great way to be able to, hey, let me just create a breakout room in the very beginning. That way, if I have to pull students aside, I can go ahead. And give them that opportunity to be able to quickly have that private environment where they can ask me that question. As a reminder, you can split your meetings into 50 different concurrent breakout rooms. I know that sounds crazy, and it really is, unless you had a huge kind of workshop maybe you're trying to facilitate with a lot of helpers, but that is the amount that you can have. As the host, you can visit any breakout rooms at any point in time. Please know that you cannot visit multiple breakout rooms at once. You can also not listen in on all of the breakout rooms simultaneously. Believe it or not, that's a question that we get a lot from folks. That is not a feature right now, nor do I think it will ever be a feature. So sorry if that's something you're interested in. The one thing I do want to call out, while we like to pump the iPad and the iPhone apps because they are great on Zoom and they work really well, the one thing you cannot do is you cannot currently create breakout rooms from an iPad. So getting started, breakout rooms, and this is one of the first new things that I want to call out. Breakout rooms can be created by the host, or as of December-ish 2020, they can also be created by co-hosts in your meeting. If you remember, or if you've been using breakout rooms in the past, this used to be a feature dedicated solely to the host, which made it where you kind of were it, right? You couldn't have any of that additional support. Again, not a huge deal for maybe your class of 20 students, but if you're trying to maybe have an entire department get together with students and you have 50, 100 students in there, it's a lot to handle by yourself. So we're really excited to be able to have this feature enabled for co-hosts now as well. There's 3 ways we can create breakout rooms. We can have Zoom automatically assign the students to the however many rooms we create. We can manually choose which students go into which rooms. And finally, we can have participants self-assign their rooms. In other words, we can allow students to basically, when we create our 5 rooms, we can have students go and choose which room they're going to be a part of. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute why this might be helpful, but this is one of the questions we get a lot. Hey, I have these same groups that are working on a group project throughout the entire length of the semester. How can I have them just, always be the same? And so previously, it was a lot of work because at the beginning of every class, you had to go and manually set those groups and set the assignments for which students are going where. Now, with that new third option that came out around October or September of last year, you can create, say, 5 groups, call them Group A, Group B, Group C, so on and so forth, turn them on, and then students can click the button, and then depending on what their assignment is, go and choose that group. And so in the screenshots that I'm going to be demoing, we'll see what that looks like. And one final option, kind of note I want to call out, you want to ensure that you're actually signed in to Zoom on your computer as the host for the meeting prior to logging in. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. That's something we can easily deal with, and we can also set you up with OIT to kind of walk you through and make sure that you're getting there. It's not that hard, don't worry. It's just something, if that's kind of sounding you're unsure of that, or you're unaware of it, or have no idea what I'm talking about, that's a great thing to come to drop-ins, and that way we can hook you up with somebody from the desktop team or media services to walk you through that. All right, so let's dive in. How are we going to create these rooms? If we remember earlier, we have our Zoom toolbar at the bottom. Instead of doing the share screen button this time, we're going to be focusing on, obviously, the breakout room button. So a couple of different features I'm going to call out that we'll see in a second. There's 2 options or 2 ways to get your students to the breakout rooms. They can either accept the invitation to enter that room, or we can have it set where they just get forced into that breakout room. Participants you can choose whether or not participants are allowed to leave the breakout rooms, or however long you want to allow the host to close, however long you want to leave them open. You can set a countdown clock for they automatically close after a certain time. And you can also do this thing called a broadcast, or basically like an announcement to all of the rooms. That way, if you want to say, hey, 5 minutes, you can just send that message. It appears as a banner, and I'll show you that. All right, so what does it look like? So like I mentioned before, let's go ahead. And we're going to click on the breakout room button. Once we click on the breakout room button, we're going to get the second screen here in the middle. This is a little drop down for where it says create 5 breakout rooms. This is going to be create however many breakout rooms that you want to choose on that drop down. The 3 options you'll have are assign automatically, assign manually, or let the participants choose. Like I mentioned, let's look and see what it kind of looks like on let participants choose in a minute. But first, let's take a look at if I want to assign those, assign the students manually. We would choose assign manually and click on create, at which point we're going to get this third screenshot on the right. Once we get this third screenshot on the right, we'll notice that there's a little blue assign button. Once we click on that assign button, you're going to see a list of all of the names of the participants who are currently in your course. And the way that we set that assignment is we just check off the name that we want to appear. So we'll set Erin into breakout room 1, and then we'll set Jack into breakout room 2. What if I make a mistake and I want to switch that around? Well, super easy. What we'll do, we'll hover over the student's name. When we hover over their name, we're going to see this little new button that shows up that says move to. When you click on move to, you can then choose where you want to move the student into. Is that making sense so far? Okay. So once we set those assignments, I also want to call out in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little options button. When we click on the options button, we have a couple of those different options that I mentioned before that we have to choose from. The first one is move all participants into breakout rooms automatically. So if this button is not checked off, that's going to be that invitation feature we talked about. So if you don't want students to kind of get forced into there, what would happen when we open the rooms and this button is not checked off, students would get a little pop-up on their screen saying you've been invited to a breakout room, at which point they can then choose to click it, and then they would be put into the room. Truth be told, Quayle and I tend to go ahead and check that off because we find that it's a little bit more seamless and a little bit easier to get everybody on their merry way. It's a little bit less prompting and interaction. We've also found that sometimes participants may be stepped away from their computer, and then when they come back, they're really clueless. And so it depends on what you're trying to look for there, I guess, I suppose. But like I mentioned, I personally like to check that off. That way, once we open the rooms, everybody goes on their merry way. The second option that we see checked off on the screenshot is allow participants to return to the main session at any time. That's a mouthful, right? In essence, we like to keep that on because if a student has a question and wants to come back to that main room to ask you a question, they can easily do so. The third option, breakout rooms close automatically after X amount of minutes. That is what it says. You can have Zoom just go ahead and create that countdown. And then once we get to the end of that, say 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30-minute time frame, everybody comes to the main session. And then the third option is just once you close all the rooms, if there's a little countdown timer that students, it's not an abrupt end to their conversation. Once we're satisfied with all of our settings and once we've set all of our breakout rooms assignments to where they need to be, we'll go ahead and click on the Open All Rooms button. Once we click on the Open All Rooms button, our Breakout Rooms dialog box will change in appearance a little bit. And what will happen, all of our students in the assigned breakout room will appear here. And this little green dot is just an indicator of whether or not they've been properly moved into that room. If for whatever reason the student is not over there yet, you would see a little gray box here saying not in, I forget the exact language is clearly. It's something like not in there or not assigned or something like that.
Not joined.
Not joined, thank you. Questions on that so far of what we're looking at on the screen? As a reminder, and like I mentioned earlier, the host as well as the co-host in your meeting can join any of the rooms at any point in time. They would just click on the join button right next to the breakout room title. When either you or participants, meaning the students, are in the breakout room, their toolbar at the bottom is going to change to the screenshot shown here. If we notice in the bottom right-hand corner, instead of having the red leave or the red end meeting button, we see the color change to blue and it says leave room. And what would happen once the student clicks on that, they can then click on the leave breakout room button and they'll get brought back into the main session.
Question.
Sure.
If someone accidentally leaves the room, can they come back to the room?
Yes, they can. So what will happen if they were to leave the room, they would, and they go back to the main session, they will have this breakout rooms button in their toolbar. And once they click on that, they could go back to their room. Good question. So like I mentioned earlier, one of the other features when our rooms are open is we can broadcast a message to all students. The way that it will appear is as a text banner at the top of the room. So in essence, this is a great way to basically give students fair warning that the session is coming to an end, or maybe you want to give them a prompt. If the breakout room session is going to be scheduled for 15 minutes, and every 5 minutes you want them working on a different activity, instead of you having to go room to room to room to room to room and give them that instruction, you can just click on this broadcast a message to all, type in your message, and then click the broadcast button. Finally, once we're ready to end the breakout room session and bring all of our kiddos back into that main Zoom meeting, we'll click on the close all room button. Questions so far on what we covered? Again, we will do a demo at the end for you to see what that participant experience is like, but any questions on what we've done so far? Sure, Julia.
If you want to do this ahead, but you don't want to use it until like 30 minutes into the class, is that possible?
It is. So you can set up your breakout rooms at the very beginning of the class session. What you'll do is you just won't click on this open all rooms button until you're ready.
Oh, okay.
Great. I do that all the time whenever I'm setting up breakout rooms. In fact, last night we were working an event. We had like 30 participants, but their breakout rooms weren't going to be open until like 20 minutes in. As they were coming in, I was setting up their assignments. That way I didn't have to really do anything the rest of the night. And it works really well.
Can you do it an hour ahead? Like if I have two classes back to back, can I set both classes up or just
We'll come back to that. So there is a feature called pre-assigned breakout rooms.
Mhm.
It is heavily dependent on students being properly logged into Zoom on their computers,
Oh, okay.
which I'm not saying, look, we do it with some instructors. It's really one of those things, if you feel, because we had a couple of instructors last semester, they teach 3 classes back to back to back. And they're saying like, it's impossible for me in an hour-long class to be able to do this. If you're interested in doing that feature, you really need to dedicate like one of your class days to making sure and troubleshooting with students to make sure that they're properly set up, and then knowing if they're not, that they have to get in touch with OIT to make sure everything is set up properly.
How do I know if they're properly set up?
You would basically try to do it one day in class, and
Okay.
that's something we can set up. We have no problem helping you set that up. It's more involved though, so we really need to do it in like a office hour session.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So let's talk about the participant view for students again. Like I mentioned earlier, we have those 2 ways to get kiddos onto their merry way in the breakout room, right? We have the force them in there or the invitation. If we choose to not force them and do that invitation, here's a screenshot on the right-hand side of what that invitation will look like. It'll say you have been assigned to a breakout room. Go ahead, click the button and join your breakout room. At any point in time, I think, Molly, you had asked the question, can students go back to their breakout rooms if they leave? Absolutely. The breakout room button will appear there for students. They'll just click on that and they'll be brought back into their breakout room. Quick note, while you can record the activities within a breakout room, you currently cannot record them to the cloud. So in other words, if you had wanted to get the breakout room sessions recorded, they have to be recorded to students' computer, and then you would have to get a copy of that recording somehow. So we tend to steer folks away from really using that feature. And then finally, there is a little ask for help button within the breakout rooms the students can click on at any time. What will happen if a student was to click on that button? You will get a notification as the host or the instructor in that course. And it essentially, it kind of looks like this top screenshot. It's going to say breakout room 2 is asking for help. And then you would have a quick join that breakout room button. Does that make sense? Like I mentioned earlier, almost everything we're talking about today, with the one big exception, is doable on the mobile apps, either for iOS or Android platforms. So if students are joining from their phone or their iPad, say, they can still participate in breakout rooms. However, you as the host cannot create breakout rooms from a mobile device right now. That is still something reserved for the desktop version of Zoom. Any questions on that? And so finally, a couple of best practices we just want to share with everyone before we start doing that quick demo so you can experience what breakout rooms are like. And this is based on feedback that we've gotten both from other instructors as well as when Quayle and I are doing workshops with other faculty. I know this kind of sounds silly and obvious, but I think it's easy to forget. If we're going to be creating breakout rooms for students, make sure there's a very clear objective for what students are supposed to be doing in that breakout room. Because I cannot tell you how many times we've heard from both faculty and students, okay, we get everybody into the breakout room and then students are sitting there, okay, what are we supposed to be doing? Even if you tell them on Zoom, that's probably also going to happen because maybe they weren't paying attention. And so what we like to recommend faculty try to do is either have it posted on their Canvas page as a whole set of instructions, maybe you're uploading a PDF, or maybe we're even setting up a Google Doc where students not only have their instructions, but students, when they're in their breakout rooms, will have an activity that they need to work on within the breakout room. I believe this afternoon session with Hee-Young Kim, she's doing the engaging students in Zoom session, kind of covers different examples of activities of what to do in breakout rooms. For example, using that collaborative document like a Google Doc. One of the other things we like to make sure that everybody's aware of, set that clear time limit. That way students are aware. Using the broadcast a message feature is an awesome way to say, hey, we have 10 minutes left in the session, 7 minutes left, 2 minutes left. That way they know, because you're not able to shout in the beginning at the, in the front of the class anymore, right? Using that broadcast a message feature is great for that. And then finally, if you are not comfortable using breakout rooms, you've never done it before as the host, but you really want to, practice with your department, practice with your colleagues, even practice with your family and friends if you would want to try and drag them into it. With Rider Zoom, you do not have to create meetings just tied to Canvas courses. Using the rider.zoom.us website, you can create meetings with whoever if you wanted to practice this. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share really quick unless there's any really jumping questions. I'm going to create a couple of breakout rooms. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.